enjoy the event.
All right, thank you so much, Emily, and welcome to everybody. My name is Tony Mall, and I'll be hosting tonight's reading. I am a writer living in Baltimore, but my friend Nick is going to tell you a little bit more about me in a sec. Let me first start by saying thank you so much for joining us tonight. Whether you're streaming in locally or from somewhere else in the world, it's a pleasure to have you here. Outright has that video from our sponsors, but I do want to thank our sponsors and everyone who made this possible. I also want to take a moment to thank specifically Outright, the DC Center, everyone volunteering over the next few days. Gatherings like these, whether they're virtual or in person, they're so important because queer literature is valuable and queer community is valuable and queer people are valuable. Specifically, I'd like to thank Emily, who you just heard from, who was so patient with us as we put this reading together and is just generally amazing. I want to thank them and anyone else who was part of the decision to open the festival with trans voices. It's an absolute honor. There are so many incredible writers and incredible voices being shared in the coming days, and it's a wonderful feeling to be able to pull the curtain open ahead of all this trans and queer brilliance. So here we are. Welcome to the first official reading of Outright 2023, Trans and Non-Binary Presents and Futures. I am over the moon right now to read alongside such incredible writers for tonight's reading. In part, I put this reading, by just picking some of my favorite trans and non-binary writers in the region, folks who I wanted to read alongside, whose work I personally cherish. But when I thought about what we have in common, I came to the theme, presents and futures. Whether we're writing prose or poetry, fiction or honesty, our work is exploring both what it means to be trans and non-binary in this moment, in the midst of an anti-trans crisis and the sixth extinction, and an eye toward what it could mean. Sometimes that's something like a speculative anthology of trans sci-fi, and sometimes it's just a call for letting trans folks have our trashy music, TV, and film. Sometimes it's a poetry of growing into and out of queer, non-binary boyhood, and sometimes it's poetry that considers what community and gender mean during a period of collapse. So I've asked each of us to select something roughly towards those themes, what is now and what could be. And I'm asking you all, the audience members, to reflect on how the work we selected does that. I want to start by recognizing that I personally am presenting tonight from colonized Piscataway land, but that land recognition is only the first step of a long process of decolonization. I encourage everyone here to spend some time reading about the land back movement and considering it each time you hear these recognitions mentioned. That established, I am honored to introduce our first reader for the night, Nick Anstett. Nick Anstett is a queer speculative writer from Baltimore, Maryland. She is a graduate from the Clarion Science Fiction and Fantasy Workshop, University of Oregon's MFA program, the Lambda Literary Emerging Writers Retreat, and the Tin House Summer Workshop, where she was a 2021 scholar. Her work appears in Witness Magazine, Passages North, Michigan Quarterly Review, and elsewhere. Nick is currently at work on a collection of short stories and a novel. Take it away, Nick.
Thank you so much, Tony. That was such a great intro, and I really appreciate being a part of this panel. When Tony reached out to me and was like putting together the idea for the panel, I had a lot of different sort of reactions about what exactly piece to read for this. A lot of my work deals with the spectacular and fantastical, but it's also a lot of times a little bit apocalyptic. And so I picked an apocalyptic piece for today. And I think this piece in a way came out of a feeling of, I think, sort of bitterness and sadness that it comes from. I think a lot of queer people feel this, but I think especially trans people, of discovering who you are and at a later stage in your life. And I think it hits especially harder in this moment. Tony mentioned the sixth extinction and dealing with this moral panic against queer and trans people. It's sort of hard not to feel like you arrived at like a particularly climactic moment just as you're starting to understand yourself. So I wrote a story that exploded that and added a robot uprising. It's called Love Machine, and it was in the most recent issue of Passages North. I'm just going to read the first little section of it, but I encourage you all to check out the rest of it. It is online. Okay, cool. This is called Love Machine. The robots have taken Seattle, and I am on the apps again. I can no longer sleep in my half-empty queen bed without another body. More than India, I miss her dog, Binky, who diagonally draped himself across the mattress every night. Whether it was a soggy July evening or one of Baltimore's cruelly dry winter nights, I could count on a furry dog blanket. Now my nighttime hands grab only limp fabric and empty air. I miss the warmth, and I miss having something living to pull towards me, which in the last several months had always been Binky. Even before she left, I could tell India was pulling away. So now I'm spending my nights doing the machine uprising, swiping through the singles of the greater Chesapeake Bay area. I'm not alone in this, at least. It turns out the oncoming annihilation of organic life makes loneliness even more lonely. You picked the right time to start messing around again, Krista told me over Bloody Marys 2 weeks ago. Even the straightest of straight guys are sleeping with transsexuals now. There's no room for pickiness. I could always tell that part of India blamed Krista for my transition. She was still my only close trans woman friend, and the first example I ever saw of someone proudly living a life that I had ruled out as a possibility for myself. Krista only had eyes for men, but in a way she had seduced me, her unabashed sensuality and confidence broadcasting the joys of a life that I had buried. We'd first met 2 years ago at a gay bar downtown. I was still struggling through an ill-advised film degree at the time, and several of my cohort mates had decided to get trashed at the local queer watering hole. Sure, some of us were out and looking for willing bodies, but the majority of us wanted to occupy a corner table and hoped that this would be one of the rare nights when John Waters would wander in. Krista had slid into the empty space of the bar to my right as I waited for a blue Hawaiian. She told me that she loved a man that could order a fruity drink. It's yummy, I had replied. Why wouldn't you drink something that tastes good? She smiled and asked me to dance, and I told her that I was taken. She frowned a playful frown, and we talked for 2 more hours about the city's slowly unraveling queer scene, that I was one of the more tolerable art students that she had met, and how we both didn't understand The Sopranos. Now she's out on a date with a man named Paul that she met in line for bread, and I am alone in my bedroom swiping. For a while, I kept the TV on as white noise, but so few stations are running anymore. The robots had raised most of Los Angeles during the first days of their onslaught, so now it was mostly local shows or whatever nervous broadcasters operated out of any of the states further east than the Rockies. Mainly reruns of comfort shows and live news broadcasts at the front lines. But you could only see footage of giant automatons tearing apart tanks and frying unlucky soldiers with heat rays so many times before it just starts to become numb, and not even noteworthy of being a background noise to swiping. Besides, we all knew the robots were coming. Nothing could stop them in their march eastward. Honestly, I didn't really even know what I wanted from the apps. Krista tells me that I should give men a try, but I'm nervous. Sure, I had fantasized about a firm, manly arm around my waist and scratchy kisses of stubble, but I had only ever dated women, and never really as a woman myself, except for India, who informed everything I knew about love, sex, and dating as an adult. I had texted India once when the robots had first begun blasting their way through Silicon Valley and gobbling up transformers and power grids. A simple, "Are you seeing this? W2F, this is scary." I got a one-word reply in return. Krista took my phone that night and deleted India from my contacts. 6 years of dating, and I never learned her phone number by heart. What would I even do for a date? Most of the local bars and restaurants were still functioning, but we all knew this was a limited time thing. California was gone and took with it almost all of our nation's produce. The will to work in the service industry with a mechanical Armageddon looming on the horizon surely wouldn't last much longer. I give it 3 weeks before we all start living off oysters scraped off the docks of the Inner Harbor. 3 days ago, I had matched with a girl named Bianca, who asked if I wanted to listen to a noise band at some underground bar in Pigtown. She had looked fun, her smile loud and light, and she played the violin, hoping to join the BSO someday, if symphonies survived the robot death march. I told her I was trans on a FaceTime date, and she hadn't even seemed to notice. She nodded and asked me again where I'd gone to college. I canceled on her today, the day of our date, said I was sick with some sort of stomach bug. I told myself that I didn't really want to listen to atonal screeching on my night out, but I knew that I was scared and swaddled by my own hopelessness. She texts to ask if I need anything, but I don't reply, I swipe. There are so many apps now. Back when I was single, back when I was a boy, there had been Tinder, Bumble if you fancied yourself a progressive, OkCupid if you were desperate. I was used to swiping hopelessly on bus rides or while taking a shit. The apps never back then never pinged for me. I never once went on a date with somebody I met from them. I met India through a friend of a friend at a free concert in a city park. Now, though, it's a cacophony. I've turned my phone on silent and disabled vibrations. I told myself it was just apocalyptic horniness, now, but not that I'm more desirable now that I'm a woman. I was scared of what an ego would do to me. You need to get over yourself, Krista tells me later that night. Paul apparently had been a dud who had tried to bury his emotional baggage in essential oils, and she had decided that spending the early hours of her morning with my mopey self was a better use of her time. We sat in my living room on a collapsing $200 couch, sipping Jack and Cokes, the only drink I could pull together from what was in my pantry. I don't even want to be with India anymore, I say, which is only partly true. Krista shoots me a small eye roll, but remains otherwise silent. There had been a part of me that had almost been excited when India told me she was leaving. I had heard, especially from the carefully worded disgust that she had used to describe my changing body. But mostly, I also felt eager. I never got to get dolled up for a date or seduce a stranger or even get wooed by some interested guy or girl or NB. All my relationships had just sort of happened into existence, or I had been the pursuer. I wanted to be wanted again, but I don't know how. Thanks. Okay, so that's the first bit of the whole thing. Y'all should check out the rest of it. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Tony. Okay, so Dr. Tony Mall is a queer and trans poet and essayist. They are the author of Out of Step, a memoir, which won the Lambda Literary Award in Bisexual Nonfiction and the Nonfiction Collection Prize. Her latest book, You Cannot Save Here, won the Jane Feldman Poetry Prize and is now available from Washington Writers Publishing House. Their poetry has also received the Adele V. Holden Award for Creative Excellence and the Bill Knott Poetry Prize, along with nominations for the Pushcart Prize and Best of Net. Tony holds an MFA in Creative Writing and Publishing Arts from University of Baltimore and a PhD in English from Morgan State University. She is a Gemini. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nick. It's such a pleasure reading with you. I love that story. I want to talk to you because I think I want to teach that story this fall. Thank you for that. And I hope everyone in the audience will go check out the rest of the story. I'm going to be reading from my book, my latest book, You Cannot Save Here. It is a collection of poems about what we do with the small moments that matter most to like what it means to be a person, falling in love, falling out of love, gender, desire, friendship, family, my little dog, what those moments mean when it feels like the world is ending, whether that's pandemic or climate disaster or police violence or the end of democratic systems. How do we get on with what it means to be a person when it feels like the world's ending? So the first one I'm going to read from it is called, the first one I'm going to read is You Cannot Save Here. It's one of the title poems from the book. And it's after Mary Oliver, the poet who I think a lot of you will know, and John Berger, who's a 1970s art critic. You cannot save here. Whole blocks give way to blight, and I darn my favorite sweater. I'm lying. I pay someone to darn my favorite sweater. I'm lying. I buy a new sweater, assuming endless supply. Skip my long run day and stay indoors. Watch ways of seeing while working out a body I can't save in the long run. A body I can't afford to resolve and won't before the walls rot. The top of the world packs up and goes more quickly than we predict. I'm grinding experience points. The mirror sends me on a side quest. I clutch my gut like a hamburger, murmur 180 by April. Hail Mary, full of grace, I keep trying to do the one wild and precious life thing, make something lavender of the hooded crow's wailing cries, fold together a family of lovers who know the most poetic ways of barricading the doors. We get on with it as the fires start. Focus on breathing, anything sacred, the holiness of hands, of hand jobs, of starting gardens of garlic climbing through the floorboards, more tender names for orgies, for Aprils, for the last time the earth bows to the sun. This next one is called Asking for Prep. And it is a poem about asking for prep for the first time at the health center as a graduate student. Asking for prep. The nurse asked me about risk factors, and I don't tell her that sometimes love is shaped like fingers folded into fists that feel like the brink between pinch and seized piston. Instead, I say I was born during the plague, under the sign of the pig, which makes me young enough for panic to have never kissed me like that, but old enough to worry constantly every time my body is gifted and split, and I call it safer, but I cannot pretend. I don't know men unwound down to the bone. I know it's better now, but I describe why I can barely afford sex that doesn't kill me, how we are tender and raw, tendon and maw, and the terror of asking feels half new to me. I'm sorry, I tell her. I'm not usually this optimistic. This one is called Wrath of a Queer God, and it's in the book. And I picked it tonight because I actually read it at my first outright that I ever read at. And now that I'm back with this book and it's in it, I want to take a time to read it. This is Wrath of a Queer God. The first ones to go would be the tasteless, anyone who has wielded unrhymed sacred text as armament, made body holy with Leviticus, or even denied a name at a holiday dinner. I'd be an Old Testament type. No Greek, no fear as I cast down my wisdom in the form of lightning bolts, flooding southern towns that build billboards for blonde Jesus. Thou shalt have no other before me in hairy legs and platform heels. Next, I'd come for the trailer parks, not that the salt of the earth have wronged, but to deny the shame of my own genesis, leaving only the baby butch tufts to testify, to reinscribe the words awesome and enormity with the weight they're due. The rich I'd eat whole, consuming capital and shitting out bread and boutique health clinics. This hunger not only devastates, but lets rise thrift store monarchs, the most clever among you, now kings in their knockoff luxury, now queens in their shoplifted Mac. I tear to timber every suburban church, in part for their precepts, but more for their aesthetic. How dare build anything but peacock glory, stone and glass phalluses. Look now to the lesbian witches in hiking boots. Let them show you what structures the moon desires. I am everything you say I am. Witness my agenda, shade and spite, swallowing men whole. This is another in the book called You Cannot Save Here. In total, there are like 29 poems in the book called You Cannot Save Here. This one's after Rilke, the poet, and Fauci. After 148 days inside, stacked end to end, from hoodie and heater to straining central air, I reconsider the body problem. On one hand, who needs hands? A rib cage stuffed with disquiet, the soft tissue of desire, that dark center where the narrative gets jammed up. But fuck, do you remember the four of us and both dogs tucked into a hatchback, howling Dolly lyrics till we went raspy? Or do you recall stone soup picnics in the park, the mosquitoes mauling my leg as we passed my favorite gay poems back and forth in the grass? You held open a thin book with one hand, a pit from your sucking lips with the other. I used my index fingernail to press tiny crosses into the raised pink of my skin. I'm going to read two more. This is another You Cannot Save Here, and it's after Eileen Miles, the queer trans writer, and this great quote that she has they have in the Paris Review's Art of Poetry. You cannot save here after Eileen Miles. What are you supposed to be tweeting during the storm? The thing about history is we forget how often we are sitting in the living room when it happens. You're mashing the buttons on the remote you still haven't replaced the batteries in when it happens. I know your phone makes you feel like you're there, but you're not there. You just turned off the stove and there's winter light coming through the blinds, but it's quiet where you are when it happens. You are wishing, did you turn the stove off? You bought better bread when it happens. You're, go make sure you turn the stove off. Dog needs a walk and your grilled cheese is getting anxious when it happens. There's this elder who says it's hard to figure out what's poetry and what's a tweet at this time. And it's true, you're not really sure what happens next either. And then for my last poem, I am going to read the last poem in the book. It's called The City That Returns is the City. And I'm going to mention my favorite flowers in here, the crocuses. Two things you need to know. One, this poem was written during that spring of 21 when we all thought we made it through and like we were vaccinated and Delta and Omicron hadn't raised their heads yet and everyone's feeling optimistic and sexy and we're going outside. And I saw the crocuses blooming in spring and they became a symbol for that. The other thing you need to know is you should Google the origin of the crocus flower in Greek mythology. It's a gay story, which I love. This is The City That Returns is the City. 1, I walk by a body sprawled out in the grass in a park that's been empty for a year. And there's something about spring that summons Savasana before corpse. There's a hubris in the crocuses littering color across the city, in the tail end of the plague year, in the tail end of the Anthropocene. The city that returns is the city that was before. For better or worse, the world that returns is still dying. 2, I'm not out here trying to be a poet who writes about flowers. Just Hermes loved a boy so much, he tags his man's name in thawing parks every April. Purple crown, golden halo, perennial bottom. 3, the crocus's hubris rhymes with optimism. The spring sings the same myth as the fall. You cannot save here. Thank you all so much. It's such an honor to read. I'm really, really excited to move forward and to introduce our next writer. K.M. Sfera is a queer and trans author who lives in Baltimore, Maryland with his dog and large cat. He's the author of speculative novels such as First Become Ashes and Docile, and a third forthcoming that follows up his Hugo and Nebula nominated novelette, Small Changes Over Long Periods of Time. They're about cults and trauma, consent and debt, and a horny trans vampire, respectively. His short fiction appears in Tor.com, Uncanny Lightspeed, and more. You can find him on the internet at kmszpara.com and on Twitter and Instagram at kmszpara. Take it away.
Hello. So I am going to read from that novelette, actually. Novel forthcoming. It is called Small Changes Over Long Periods of Time. This was published a couple of years ago at this point. And I'm going to start a little bit in the middle here because I think it really speaks to the tone of futures and trans forwardness. The main character, Finley, is a gay trans guy who at the beginning of the story is bitten by a vampire. And his body begins to change in ways that he wouldn't necessarily expect that a cis vampires might change. The vampire who bites him is a cis gay man. We feed on blood bags together. Andreas convinces my landlord to break my lease early and without penalty, just like he convinced Dr. Tregman not to report us so that I can move into the guest room. He buys me a real bed and a mug that says, "Blood, it's not just for breakfast anymore." During the first week, we eat and fuck. I'm still not in love with him. Don't expect to be. but he lets me feed on him in the shower to ease my bloodlust. I stumble out, naked and wet, still unsteady on my changing legs. My muscles thicken and shape the more I drink. My facial hair fills in thick and dark where it was patchy before, a fine, perfectly groomed layer on my cheeks and neck. I always thought vampires looked like more beautiful versions of their human selves, though I can't imagine a duller Andreas. Stop staring at yourself in the mirror, he teases. Stop staring at myself. I rub a towel over my hair. It rests shiny and perfect without any help. I've never been happy with the way I look until now, and I'm not supposed to stare. Andreas's smile is so subtle, I'd have missed it with human eyes. He lifts me onto my new IKEA bed. Can vampires cut their hair? I ask, diverting Andreas's mouth from its intent. What? Why? You just said. When we were talking earlier, you said our government was as old as your last haircut. We can make small changes over long periods of time. If you cut it all off, it would grow back while you're sleeping. Mostly I was being facetious, bit of vampire humor. He glances at my hair. Why? You weren't thinking of changing anything, were you? I wasn't, not really. But knowing I can't, what if prosthetics or surgery becomes so advanced I'm going to live to see that? Doctors will be able to grow you a dick using stem cells, or someone will invent a cybercock that pairs with a brain implant. In a future where trans people will be able to customize their bodies, I won't be able to. Mine will reject and revert. Beautiful, but stagnant. No implants, no surgeries, not even a haircut. This is why trans people aren't allowed to undergo vampirification. It's still better than dying. Will I feel that way in 100 years? Finley, no, not planning to change anything. Sorry. You okay? Yeah, I focus on the body I have, on the things I can control, like my current arousal. Just get back to it. I force a smile when I recline. The smile sticks. The particle board rocks under the force of our weight, knocking over the canvas. I leaned against it. Andreas dives between my legs and sucks on my clit. It's grown like a satisfied tick, and I'm hornier than I was during my first 6 months on T. I twine my fingers through Andreas's shiny curls and hold his face against my crotch. He's happy to oblige, trailing his kisses over my abdomen and up my chest. Ever since I turned, I can't get enough of his mouth and fingers on my nipples. I missed them. And now they're back, healed by his venom. He pulls away, leaving my slick, wet chest cold and exposed. Don't stop, I whisper. Andreas looks between my chest and my face, and then back to my chest. Something's wrong, he says. What? Nothing's. I pat the bare skin and wince. Tender dimples of breasts poke out. What's happening to me, I ask. Andreas swallows a hard lump in his throat. Your body, it's I don't know. I skitter back until I hit the headboard, until I can't run any further away from my own chest. Make it stop, I say. When Andreas doesn't move, I shout, make it stop. He hisses at me for silence. Please, I whisper, please make it stop. Something warm rolls down my face. Red drops splatter on the growing mounds of my chest. Andreas growls as he rips the covers off the bed and flings them into the air. The colorful cotton drifts slowly to the floor between us. He bites his bottom lip, leaving a thin red line that drips down his chin. I have an idea, he says. What? I'll be right back. But before he can get too far, he turns back. Don't move. I shake my head. I won't. I can't, and I don't. I stare at the pattern on Andreas's manufactured quilt. The colors are intense, even in the dark. Red, too bright for blood. Yellow, too clear for the sun. A sun I won't see again until I'm God knows how old, and only then from the shadows. The quilt doesn't warm me like I wish it would. My body's cold now. It used to be warm. Testosterone runs warmer than estrogen. I stopped wearing a sweater to work. Wonder if I'll start again. The door clicks shut. Andreas appears in the doorway. He slows to a human pace mid-step. I can see the change now. It looks like slow motion. How slow must walking feel to him after so many years? Drink this. Andreas crawls onto the bed and wraps an arm around me. He rests a blood bag against my lips. I push it away. I'm not hungry. You're hungry for this, trust me. I purse my lips before accepting the bag. My fangs pierce the thick plastic so easily, I have to concentrate on not ripping it open over the mattress. How do you like it? Andreas watches me. I don't like when he watches me. I look inexperienced. I am, but that's not the point. Andreas makes vampirism look casual, like a lifestyle, like vegetarianism. I carefully back off the bag long enough to really swallow, to run my tongue over my teeth and let the blood absorb into my body. My temperature rises. A warm euphoria radiates from my skin, warms my brain, swells between my legs. This is good, I say. Andreas smiles. What did you do to it? Vampire venom enhances what it finds. Clear voice, luxurious hair, firm muscles. Remaining breast tissue, I get it, I say. I grit my slippery teeth. What did you do to this? Injected it with testosterone. He looks thoughtfully between me and the bloody bag. I didn't think when I drained your blood that I depleted any hormones you might have injected. Most humans' bodies keep producing whatever they need. Mine doesn't, I say. I know that now, though I'd reintroduce what you need. Steer your new vampire body in the right direction. Not bad, Dr. Andreas, I say. I crush the bag against my mouth and suck it dry. The plastic crinkles until it's raisin-like in my hands. A drop spills over my chin and tickles my neck. Andreas leans over and licks away. I growl and toss the empty bag onto the floor, accepting Andreas's mouth against mine. He avoids my chest, though I feel the mounds press against his shirt when he climbs on top of me. I wake up horny. Andreas sleeps beside me, still, his hand draped over my chest to protect me from it. My consciousness stirs him. When he flexes his hand, it brushes my side and I push it away. It's too much. I can't stay in and fuck away the bloodlust for the rest of my life. Hey, Andreas props himself up, eyes only half open. He stares at my body, says, they're gone. I look. I don't want to, but I have to, and he's right. The area is not as hard and defined as it used to be. Andreas gently touches the puffy skin. I gasp. The air feels strange in my lungs, like a lump in my throat. I quickly expel it and sit up and say, I need more of that blood. And I'll stop there.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Kellen. Every time I hear you read, I blush a little, but this is the first time I got like emotional thinking about the speculative possibilities of transness and vampirism. Got me verklempt for a second. It's lovely.
Yes. I feel like I have to like part identify as a vampire at this point. Like, no, this vampire. Thank you.
Thank you. And then to round us out, I'm so excited to introduce my dear friend, Jason B. Crawford. Jason is a writer born in Washington, D.C. and raised in Lansing, Michigan. Their debut full-length Year of Unicorn Kids is out from Sundress Publications. Crawford holds a Bachelor of Science in Creative Writing from Eastern Michigan University and is the co-founder of the Knights Library magazine. They're the winner of the Courtney Valentine Prize for Outstanding Work by a Millennial Artist, the winner of the Rhinos Founders Prize, a finalist for the Frontiers Open Prize, Bella Chapbook Contest, Variant Lit Chapbook Contest, and the 2021 Outright Chapbook Contest winner in poetry. Crawford was also a finalist for the Tom Howard Margaret Reed 2021 Poetry Contest. Their work can be found or is forthcoming in Poetry Magazine, this month's issue. It's fantastic, everybody. Go out and get it. Switlit Magazine, Rhino Poetry, Four-Way Review, Cincinnati Review, Frontier Magazine, Beloit Poetry Journal, and others. They hold an MFA in poetry from the New School. Thank you so much for being here, Jason. Take us away.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you outright, not only for the chapbook that I have with you all, but for having this beautiful, wonderful festival in a city that I dearly love. Thank you, Kellen and Nick. So great to share this space with you. And I'm just gonna read 3 poems, 2 of which are from a new project that I'm working on, and one that's going to sit in the middle is from something I did during my MFA. For the first and last poem, all you need to know that these are all ekphrastic pieces from the same photographer, Alvin Baltrop. And I would say, look up his work. It's very, very visceral, but very, very complex and beautiful. So, Self-Portrait 2. Side eye to the camera, smoking a cigarette. I think the issue is everyone has been so beautiful in all of these poems. Everyone except me. On a beach on Fire Island, I sit with the waves while they fold under like a man's knees gathering in an altar boy's offering. Even here, the way I describe the water is more beautiful than the water itself. How does water fold? I watched it. I know what is possible. It must be why I've brought so many birds. Everything they do is elegant. The magpie's bladed wings trimming the air of its fat, a mutation of thrush swell into a speckled gray sky. I mean to say everything must die, but nothing dies more beautifully than a bird fearing the night. I am not sure what will take me, but I, too, am weary of dying. When I said otherwise, I promised, dear reader, I was just pretending to be that brave. This may be the first time I ever had my poems all in order. I never do this. So I worked on a set of poems in my second semester of my MFA, really thinking about love and love poems and trying to write love poems to myself. And realizing that these are all just not love poems, but trying to understand identity and who I am as a person. And I had one of them get published with Poetry Online, which is not the capital P poetry, but a different poetry. And I really like this poem. So this is Love Poem 4 of X, a triptych. 1. I am not new to this anger. Its dull blades rest upon the neck of my history, a textbook of red engulfing me every chance it gets. There is a small space between a fist and a jaw that holds so much unspeakable love. What else can I say? I love you more than breaking everything in sight. When we are young, we fight like we do not know death is possible. And what do we have to be so afraid of? For the record, I do not condone my own actions. You stood before me, and I wasn't sure who to fight first. I chose the boy, and what of it? Think of what violence can come from all this laughter. The autobiography of my hurt, sullied by my own hurting. I became a case study on violence. Look, there, in between the flowering of the meat, a ribbon of blood thinning until it is nothing but dusk, too. In the schoolyard, we learn to fight. A tongue that should be bitten in half instead doubles in size, swallows itself into a ring of our fists. A boy says something foul, and we mutate into a flock of birds pecking at the glint in his teeth. And what is it about love that makes us want to stomp another's mouth until it sifts into a salt-covered field? Silly us. Boys with our hands around each other's necks, heavy in the stench of a boy, his joy running from my arms. When he is down, we kick him more until we can see ourselves in the reflection of the puddle he makes. 3. I believe the story started in the classroom. The quiet huffing of our spit balls sequestered in the jaw-locked desk, young boys being the only thing we have ever been taught to be, loud and violent hand. I think it started with a joke about somebody's mama or somebody's dead, and like the dead names, the air fell flat across our palms. We were ready to drag you out back and beat our love into you. Soft stoning with our fist in punishment. We painted the concrete in your ink, the side way forever stained in our tenderness towards you, the touch of another's body, even in violence. My fingers pulling at your teeth, a form of saying, I want to keep you forever in me. Spill my blood to fill the space between us. Isn't that just a form of love? A boy swings his fist at me, and that must mean I am the only thing left important in his world. So yeah, the last poem I'm gonna read is back from the book that is all about photographs of the cruising docks in so the Christopher Street Piers in New York City around 1975 to 1986. And most of these poems have the same title because really the pictures themselves didn't have titles. And I really wanted to honor Alvin in that way, especially because he didn't get the recognition that he deserved when he was alive. And for me to write in this vein, it feels like I need to honor him at the most truest as I can be. Again, thank you all for sitting with me for these poems, and I look forward to the Q&A. Untitled, 1975 to 86. I've run out of flowers to offer to the river. Instead, I fold my palms into lilies. Instead, I offer my dead to feast. I've known grief like a childish lover. By the third body, I'd forgotten to mourn. Grief became the only thing I could taste. I have not forgotten how to please a man with the corners of my tongue, to be toppled by the stag of another. What enters the throat shall either nourish or kill. I trust either way. I'm not sure if we shall all make it to June. We are already so tired. Sexton said something like this once, then lived until October. leaves drying around her feet. Am I afraid to live that long? I am afraid to let June be the marker for us. Oh, how they want us dead. Oh, how we still breathe. I celebrate in the mouth of a man, but who knows how many Junes we both will survive. Remember the river, the dead summer, the faultless birds that would pick at our toes? Did you tell the wind to not carry the stench of bile back from the morgue? Tell the wind. It keeps us remembering. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Jason. I love reading with you. I love doing this. We should keep doing this. It's so good to see you. And I'm looking forward to connecting with both you and with Nick to hear all about Lambda and how it went. At this point, everybody, we're going to move into a Q&A session. The way this is working is we're streaming through Zoom, but it's going to YouTube. So they're in the YouTube chat. Go ahead and put your questions there, and Emily's going to get them to us. That may take a sec. So I got a question all loaded, ready to go. So we'll start with that. I want to hear from everybody. What do you think the role of the trans writer is in this moment in imagining possibility for queer and trans people?
Man.
Yeah, it's a big one. I started little lightness to start us out.
I'll say that as a science fiction and fantasy writer, this is a really cool intersection for us. Like, I think I was listening to your story. I was like, oh, I also be worried about dating in the robot apocalypse. Yeah, I mean, I think that we, like for science fiction and fantasy writers, we are already used to sort of like placing ourselves in like realms of new imagination and possibility. And as trans people, we are also like gender creativity is one of my like base joys as a trans person. And so when those two come together, when we get to look explicitly at futures and other worlds and new inventions and magic, and pair that with, our sort of everyday insights and creativities and expressions, like that's a really cool, unique intersection for us specifically. So.
Yeah, just jumping off of what Kellen said. I think for me, what I see the role of like trans writers and trans voices, and again, building off of like speculative fiction in a way, is creating work that is honest to our experiences of this moment and honest to our community's experiences of this moment. And I think that's part of the reason why I enjoy Kellen's story that he read tonight. I love the idea of like taking the vampire myth, which has been around for centuries, and then taking it and putting a very explicitly trans lens on it. And that I think is part of what the trans writer, the trans experience, the trans voice is really needed for art going forward, is making sure that there is an imagined future and an imagined present along with an existing future and existing present that is spoken specifically through our voice and our experience. And that to me, I think is what like is really needed in this moment, is speaking to things that are honest to ourselves, even if we're thinking of something that is like fantastical.
For sure. And I also think that I know that there's a big need for representation throughout any type of media. It is important for people that are like us to see themselves within the literature that they're reading. And I mean, just knowing what I was reading, when I was growing up, I wasn't there. I wasn't there like as a Black person or as a trans non-binary person. And it helps shape and grow and prove that there is a tomorrow, there is something next. And and I'm very happy to read and speak and write with so many beautiful, wonderful trans writers that prove to me every day that there is something tomorrow. It helps me keep going.
I love that. And I love hearing these ideas expressed both through those of you writing like realist and autobiographical work, and also from those of you writing like speculative, fantastical work. It's really cool to see those ideas demonstrated in different ways. And I just add that like, I am, despite my like bubbliness, I'm a bit of a pessimist. And I talk a lot of shit about like the limits of representation, but I'll be real that like trans representation has been so enormous for me, not just to see possibility, but just to be like, oh, this weird specific thing, other people experience this too. Most immediately I think of, because I just reread it, Imogen Binnie's Nevada, and the way she just fucking reads me in that is just so much. And it's like really good to see like, oh yeah, this is a thing among a lot of trans femmes. I love that. I just also add real quick, again, we're the head of an amazing couple of days. So I just point out two other things that are happening in the next couple of days and that are asking similar questions. One is tomorrow at 5 p.m., The Outsider, Gender and Race in a Binary World. It's going to be a really good one. And then Sunday at 3:30, there's a panel on existence as resistance, trans poets on nationwide anti-transness. I hope that our viewers will check both of those out because they're going to be so good. Looks like Emily tossed one over to us. How do you protect your creative energy and your joy in your day-to-day life?
I can start this one. Oh,
Please,
no, go.
Oh no. That person was like, I should fill it.
I understand. I take a lot of naps. I've given myself post 30 this permission. Anyone that sees me at AWP, you will see this actually, to walk the fuck out of any room that is not serving me at that moment. And that is online, that is in conversation, that is in person. If something is not positively filling me in a truthful way, like I'm not just gonna walk out because someone's telling me the truth and I don't want to hear it. But like if it's something that like it's negative in a way that it's going to fully impact me, I don't need that energy in my space. And I only find spaces, I'm looking for spaces that are going to help me as I help them.
I love that and totally agree. There's like these memes from like a Breath of the Wild video game where they're like, just warp out. If you don't like it, you can leave. And I'm like, you can leave. As for, I have a full-time day job in the legal sector. I run my own household as a single person. I have pets that need me all the time, family I love. It's all very draining, even though I enjoy it. So for me, what's important about my creative energy is always having something to work on that I'm not being paid for at the same time. I realize that that's like a privilege as somebody who is regularly paid to write, but it can very easily become something you just do for money. And then it's easy to let your joy in it slip in the same way it slips in your day job, maybe, or any other task you might be paid to do. So I would say, play TTRPGs with your creative friends, or write fan fiction, or something like that, something that's just for you and a couple other people, that brings you joy and is not for money.
Me and Kellen have talked about connecting for TTRPGs, but Jason, Nick, you want to come down here and hang out? You're invited.
I mean, I'll join. I'm definitely down. I think for me, the things that have been most helpful are the two things that always motivate me to write are reading and community. I found that like one of the best things that I've done for like my own mental health and for like my creative energy is I have gotten up an hour earlier than I usually do, and I just read for an hour. And then that has like really gotten me like going in a way that like makes me excited to wake up in the morning, because then I have dedicated time to just like read and drink coffee. And it like, I don't know, it's like a fun way to wake yourself up, and it engages you with the language as you're sort of getting back into the day. And also just like, again, like community, like connecting with other writers. Like nothing makes me more excited to go down and like make art and to start like pouring all my energy into this thing than experiencing the work of other people that I know, and then getting to talk and like be in a room with those people. Like community to me is like the most important part of this, like this experience, and I love being a part of it.
Yeah, I love that so much. Me too. I think about that a lot. Like, why did I do this again? Why did I get into this? And in part it is to like be able to do what I get excited about and then to share it with other people who get excited about the same thing. Emily has given us the warning in the chat, so I think we're going to wrap up here. Before we go, I just want to thank each of you so much. I adore you and I adore your work, and it's really is a pleasure gathering us here tonight. I also want to thank Summer, our interpreter. Thank you so much. It's so important. And Emily, again, everyone at Outright and at the center, but particularly Emily, for making this happen. Tonight, the keynote at 7, but also just 2.5 full days of queer and trans programming. It's beautiful and it's a miracle, and I'm honored to be a part of it. So audience, thank you so much. I hope you go out and enjoy your Friday night. Thanks for kicking us off here. Again, I hope you're at that keynote at 7. Otherwise, go forth and do cool queer stuff. Bye, y'all.